The live audio industry is undergoing a revolution. It is now easier than ever to integrate any VST plugin you want into your live mixing workflow. You're not even tied to hardware anymore. If you have a laptop and a digital desk that you can pass audio back and forth, you can get an affordable VST host and host them there. You can still use the advancements from Waves with their SoundGrid server or even now Fourier audio and their transform engine and be able to host these VSTs here. All this is saying is that we can have the tools that we want, where we want them, even in a live environment. Bottom line, Moore's Law is being multiplied by the BK have it your way mentality of this generation so that we can have these tools democratized for us. And before you label me a Luddite, may think this is kind of a bad thing, all I'm simply trying to do is adopt a mindset from an unlikely place, the Amish. Yes, those folks with beards and dresses who churn butter and drive buggies, and they're actually very entrepreneurial, a very cool population. And what struck me about them after studying them a little bit more is they don't despise technology and they don't want advancement. They're just really picky about what they adopt. The thing is, their core values of valuing community and their connection with God is so true and upheld so much within the fabric of their own society that anything that can get in the way of that, they have a really rigid matrix to sift these new introductions through. And so that means when the cell phone came about, they said, okay, this is a new thing. It could be neat. They brought it in a few communities to test it out. And they decided it actually provided less connection, not more, because folks could go on their own and talk to other people rather being present and belonging to their own community. So I'm not trying to make a full stop judgment on cell phones or their own conclusions, but I really appreciated their intentionality. And so I'd like to borrow a leaf out of their book in this conversation today when VSTs on a live show are becoming more common. So I first want to start off with a brief reality check and remind us what we're all here to do as professional live audio engineers. I do want to introduce some solid VST use cases, and they're probably not what you think they are. And then I want to maybe walk through some gotchas or things to watch out for, maybe if you're new to this environment or unaware of the implications of introducing VSTs into a live workflow. And then I want to end with 6 VST plugins that I think worth investing in. A few of them are free, and they're more types rather than specific ones, although I will give you specifics. I'm really pumped to share this with you and help couch this conversation and hopefully I think a grounded approach. Before we jump into the fun stuff, I want to start with a quick reality check. I'm speaking to the professional engineer or maybe those who work at churches as volunteers. What I'm saying here is these are tools that help us accomplish a job for our clients and our congregations. They're asking us to get results for them. They're not paying us for our tools. So at the end of the day, when my air conditioner broke a few weeks ago, I didn't care what the AC repair dude walked in with. I just cared that he got it done. So when we are hired or asked to go do a job, yes, I care about the ease of my work and that I am fluid and comfortable with what is around me, but I need to get it done. So this conversation is saying, hey, will this extra tool set, VSTs being readily available, is this going to help me get that done? So I would ask yourself the question, is this percentage increase in quality or efficiency or effectiveness when investing in a tool, is this equal to the monetary investment? Is it equal to the loss of maybe fluidity or workflow because I'm having to use a mouse? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So all that being said, it's easy to see the shiny object and be like, oh my word, my mixes are going to sound like pooches now because I can use all this stuff. It's ultimately up to your decisions and your skills and all the other things that make us quality live sound engineers. The ability to talk with an artist and make them feel comfortable, the ability to manage client expectations, to be able to set things up quickly and be ready for sound check. Putting together a good mix is definitely a part of it, but I don't want us to over-index here. Okay, that's my old man rant a little bit over. Let's jump into some solid VST use cases. The first obvious one is where Wave SoundGrid servers have already been being used, and this is mostly with repeat acts or touring bands that have a very specific sound from their records they need to make available to themselves live. When you're working with the band night after night and you have rehearsals and you have virtual sound check, yes, it makes sense to have specialized tools that can get exactly the sound that you want and make that repeatable night after night. There's still engineers who do that all on a live desk, but maybe the guitarist had this Echoplex plugin that's only available as a VST. You want to make sure they get it live and they can't run it live because they want to use their own setup. You can have that now, which is pretty cool. So that makes it available to you as a specialized tool. So you can get specific vibes on a record. But again, in my own specific circumstance, I'm only in this privileged position only about 5% of my gigs, where I have plenty of time to sound check, or I have a virtual sound check, or I'm asked to get a very specific sound. Most of the time, especially on corporate gigs, it's like, hey, let's get it done. This is fast, make it efficient, be able to respond very quickly. All right. Number two, a solid VST use case as you cannot possibly do with the tools in front of you within a console or outboard otherwise. And so an obvious one for me is a true peak limiter. The X32 has it, but for some reason, no Yamaha console has it, no Allen and Heath console has it, and those are the two manufacturers I'm using. So if you're listening, developers, please put in a true peak limiter, because when I'm trying to get my stream feed or my program feed nice and hot, I need something at the top. And so the precision limiter in the X32 can do it. No matter how hard I run something into it, it's able to stop it. But right now, if I'm using those other desks, I have to pipe the signal out digitally as an insert as the last thing in my chain before the fader, bring it into a true peak limiter, which I'll share the one I'll use later on, and bring it back in just so I make sure I don't have any peaks, right? I still could technically get peaks because I have to send it digitally out of the console first, but I get the level later, so it makes that unlikely. But if there's a tool that or thing you need to get done that cannot possibly get done with the tools in front of you, and a VST can, absolutely introduce it. The third kind of category of use cases that I think the most important is the enhanced optics or information they can get to you. Most desks don't have broadcast loudness metering, so it's important to have that. Nor do they give you an easy way to be able to see an RTA. Usually they're weighted very fast, and I like to have stuff weighted slower to get a different look. So VSTs can do that. You can program a custom interface and have that separate and not clutter up with what you're having to do it on the console. So all these three, being able to work at the repeat act and get it dialed in with specialized tools. Number two, not being able to do with the tools you have in front of you and using a VST to supplement that is really helpful. Or you can use it to give you enhanced metering or other types of information about your mix so that you can in turn make it better. All right, here are some things to watch out for. Number one, it's inevitably going to increase the fragility and complexity of your setup. You're integrating more hardware, whether that's a separate server type setup, whether it's Wave SoundGrid or the transform engine or a computer. I love being able to increase the resiliency of my system. Redundancy is one way to do that. Simplicity is another. Ease of use is another. So by adding more tools, it's more things to keep updated, keep regular, to test. It's an increased failure point. So in shows that are high pressure, that it's one very important person who may or may not run this country is coming up to a podium and speaking. I need to make sure it's right. Again, at the end of the day, consoles are just computers that are optimized to do what we want them to do, but integrating more gear and more complexity decreases the resiliency or increases the fragility of your setup. So just, can you weigh that trade-off? Number two, it often can distract you from the big wins. And this is probably the biggest old man rant part, apart from the beginning, is especially a lot of studio engineers who are used to having a lot of time, who are migrating into live or working with the band, or maybe you're a church volunteer who's wanting to get into professional live audio. In that environment, you have a lot of time, it's repeated, and you can tweak. It's a gentle learning environment, much like the studio, but in live environment, You're often not in ideal rooms. You're under a very strict time schedule. The band probably showed up late. You didn't get the gear you wanted on the show, and you needed to move fast. So having a deep intuition with very simple tools in front of you to get the results you want quickly will get you there way faster than spending 15 minutes on the hi-hat with 17 Waves plugins. Okay? I know you probably know this intuitively, but we don't want to believe it, that's what really sets people apart. But working quickly and being dependable, even if my mix is like 10% less vibey than yours, is going to help me go farther than if you're over-indexing on these things that don't matter as much, which goes back to my earlier point. If you make up the entire pie of why people hire you, what makes that up? Your ability to relate to people, to see problems that advance, to work quickly, and it sounds amazing is on the list. So you're hired to do that, but make sure you are couching any of these workflow enhancements or improvements and weighing them all together to be like, what are the biggest wins? And is this tool going to help me get there? Number 3 is latency issues. So for instance, my church has a SoundGrid server, and I'm sure many Waves plugins run at the proclaimed 0 latency or 0 samples. And I can put them in and maybe get some more vibe in the vocals, and that's awesome. But the console we are blessed and fortunate to have is a PM7. So that has a lot of amazing DSP built in. And for me, there's no Waves plugins that are there that do anything better. Maybe I like the LA2A on vocals, but that's built into the PM7. So for simplicity's sake, I want it there. I used to use the 4-band dynamic EQ. That could be something like an F6, but that introduces latency, I think. I need to double check that, so please fact check me there. But for right now, there's no external monitor desk and it feeds Aviomps. And so I want that to be low latency and post my processing so they're getting a good mix in their in-ears. And so I want whatever processing I'm doing, and this is just my own workflow, to sound good in the room, sound good on the stream, and sound good in the musician's ears. And I'm most effectively able to get that when I'm using everything in the console. So for me, the only thing that's hitting the Waves server is what's happening for the stream to get it loud, a little bit of EQ, the loudness limiting. So I keep it there. So, but if you're running some specialized plugins, maybe you're used to using in the studio, and you put them either within a Waves environment or a separate computer hosted environment, just be careful to know if they add latency, especially if you're running monitors, even at front of house. Like I like Soothe 2 by Oak Sound. It's an incredible plugin, but it's only available in low latency on the Avid SXL. And I think it still does about 2.5 milliseconds of latency. Otherwise, if you run it on a computer, it's like 40 milliseconds. Again, it just needs that amount of time to buffer and do its job. So just keep track of where and how latency is being added with your VSTs. Number 4 and last of things to watch out for is they often slow you down. So with the Waves server, you have to use a touchscreen, and you're working directly with the plugin user interface. So you're having to go select within the chain what you want, select the parameter, then use the knob. So that's 3 touches. Versus if you have something all in front of you on a home view on a channel strip, you can go to the tool directly, get to it and adjust things. You have they have knobs on the surface, but a lot of manufacturers are taking more and more knobs and buttons off surfaces. So I generally think and find it slower. Again, if you're used to it, working with artists for forever, it's the same setup, you're probably very fast, but I am slow with it. This is one of the reasons why I like GigPerformer, is that you can make a custom user interface and even integrate a Stream Deck into it to give you hardware, and it's only putting the knobs and buttons in front of me that I readily need all the time versus having to hunt around and go through my plugin chain, click on that plugin and go adjust it. So just know what is going to slow you down and is it worth it. All right, let me give you 6 VST plugins I think that are worth investing in, and then we'll land this plane. First up, talked about it a little bit earlier, is a true peak limiter. This is essential if you are live streaming. Absolutely prevents anything from clipping, even if someone's clapping right in front of the lav on their chest, which happens to be a lot. And so it's just this black night that's none shall pass. A low latency one that works great is LoudMax. So I'll have a link below for this, but I use it. It sounds great. It's free. Did I say? Yeah, it's free. It's great. If you already are a Waves person and have access to their plugins, you can run the L3, the Ultra Maximizer, in low latency mode. So make sure and do that. I'm not exactly sure what the trade-offs are in sound quality. It may just have higher CPU usage to get it at that low of latency, but with a true peak limiter. There's going to be some look ahead to make sure it does it, but it's a very small amount. I think like 64 samples in the Loud Max, so I'll have to check that out. Number 2 is noise reduction. This is really important in corporate audio work. If you're not on a console, the PM7 and the DM7 have the DANC or dance or whatever it is, but noise suppression built right in. You can use also the Waves WNS if you're on an LV1 or a server workflow. I personally like using the Isotope RX voice denoise as an insert in GigPerformer. Lots of ways to do it, but I think it's worth having a denoise plugin for sure. Number 3 is an external auto mixer. So you can get the classic Dan Dugan Waves plugin, it's pretty expensive, or you can get the WT auto mixer. And this is the one that I use, and you can have up to 16 channels of auto mixing. I've done this when I've done a large corporate show, an M32, and it's built, it only has 8 channels of Dugan in it, but I think I had 24 microphones. So I bust the other ones out into GigPerformer in WT Auto Mixer and brought it in as a channel, kind of an old school workflow, but enabled me to accomplish and juggle all that wireless without worrying too much at the noise floor. Next up is a loudness meter. I really like the Ulean loudness meter too. And I have the Pro version. You can set different loudness targets, different weightings, different ways to look at it. I think the graph and user interface is really nice. So when you're streaming, you want to be able to hit a loudness target and see where you're at. Of course, Waves has their plugin that's super expensive, but often goes on sale for $35 or something. Very important to VST to have in your arsenal, especially if you're streaming a lot. Number 5 is Isotope's Tonal Balance Control 2, which the general category for this is a tonal balance metering plugin. It's basically a slowly weighted RTA with some boundaries around it. But I really like it because if I'm working in an environment, maybe a broadcast truck where I'm not familiar with the monitoring or the speakers or the generators running outside, it's super loud, and it's just really hard for me to judge which way is up. This is a good gut check for me to be able to look over and see if things are running within it. So if that line is way outside of those bounds, I might check the tonal balance of what's going on. If it's staying within it consistently, I can usually trust that's going to sound good. I usually find myself using the Modern Curve. Lastly is a mix reference plugin. So there's lots of them out there. There's reference, there's metric AB, or you can straight up use the audio player in GigPerformer, which I'm going to try out here in a few gigs. But what this does is it lets you immediately AB your current mix versus some set reference tracks, which is very cool to give you, again, another gut check of like, you're getting used to the way things are sounding in a room, you're getting ear fatigue, and you really just want to know like, hey, which way is up? Get some reference tracks you really trust and have that maybe on your cue bus, and you can cue up another track and be like, oh, whoa, oh my word, the kick drum is so much more full on this. My subs are too hot. Maybe I can bring those down and EQ up some of the kick, whatever. So really helpful for streams, especially, but even your live mix as well. All right, let's land this plane. Bottom line, VSTs, they're just another tool in the toolbox. And us being in a live environment, it is a special and different place than they usually have been. And we're grappling with how to do that elegantly. So I will leave you with 3 points. And the first is experiment first, then distill it down to the essentials. So just like a kid in a candy store is like, oh, I want this, I want that, I want to try this, I want to try that. But they're going to settle on, oh, I really like sour candy. Or at least I really like sour candy. So being able to distill down the tools to what is essential to help get your job done is important. Because you'll notice in the 6 VST plugins I mentioned up there, none of them are like super cool analog vibey stuff. Most of them are pretty utilitarian because some of those utilities have not been made readily available in the live environment. And that's what I am choosing to use VSTs. You may really love how an API 2500 sounds on the drum bus and you really want that there, go for it. That's amazing. You're now aware of all the trade-offs, so this is new to you, but experiment, then distill it down to what is essential for you to have in that environment. Number 2 is weigh the trade-offs honestly. How much fragility is being introduced in your system? Do you have extra redundancy built in? Do you really, really need this tool? Or is it just a shiny object? I'm not afraid of adding complexity, but make sure you don't add more ambiguity, right? And because complexity is inevitable, ambiguity does not have to be. Document this stuff well, really know what's happening, test your latency times, test the stability, how low of a buffer size can you get down to, how often does this crash, what are updates like. This is all going to affect how this tool is integrating into your environment. Lastly is commit once you choose a tool set. If they just remain tertiary or you're trying new stuff all the time, you won't ever become fast, efficient, or fluid with it. So make it comfortable, make it easy to access. And again, a live environment is a much more hostile environment in the studio that it changes more rapidly. You're often under more strict timelines. You're not sitting in one place all the time. So being able to be fluid and fast and adaptable with whatever tools you have, I think is more important than getting, that 5 or 10% more analog vibe with the big stack of plugins on your vocal. So what does that mean? That means build templates and expectations. So how I'm hoping to do that is I'm currently working on a custom GigPerformer template that could give me access to all 6 of those plugins that I've made. So I can easily reference my mix in a live environment, just open up my laptop, open up the template, pipe in my Q bus into GigPerformer, and away we go. Or I can easily call up the tonal loudness meter or the loudness metering plugin with a Stream Deck key. I can easily call it the tonal balance control with the Stream Deck key. Make that very fast, fluid, and efficient by integrating hardware, some templates already built, and building familiarity with what I have. All right, I would love to hear any of your hot takes. Am I completely off base? Am I a Luddite? Is it really worth it to get those 17 plugins on your vocal? Let me know what your experience has been with you integrating VSTs into it, especially if you're new, what's working for you, what's not. My name is Michael Curtis. I'll have links to all this stuff below if you want to check out some of these tools. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.